Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Alexander, and you are listening to the Middle East Tomorrow podcast. In a region long defined by headlines of conflict, a different, quieter story is being written thanks to the Abraham Accords. 5 years ago, the Abraham Accords created a new political reality, and now a citizen-led movement of peacemakers from Israel, Morocco, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain are turning that diplomatic breakthrough into a grassroots reality. In this podcast, we'll discover their personal stories and learn how they each chose collaboration over confrontation to build a more unified future. Joining me today is Avi Hasson, CEO of Startup Nation Central, who works at the intersection of technology and diplomacy, using sustainable business partnerships to build a foundation for reconciliation in the Middle East. Avi will walk us through how the region is reinventing its economy and innovation. Thanks for being here, Avi.
Hi, Megan. Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to this conversation. Let's start with just a little bit about you and how you came into this work.
Well, I spent the last 35 years actually working as part of Israel's innovation ecosystem, starting as an executive in tech companies, startup companies, and larger companies, then became a venture capitalist, an investor in early stage companies, both in Israel and in Boston. Then I joined the government, and for 6.5 years I served as Israel's chief scientist and had the privilege of founding Israel Innovation Authority. Then back to the private sector. In the past 4.5 years, I've been serving as the CEO of Startup Nation Central.
Going back to being chief scientist for Israel, talk about how that made you uniquely positioned to affect change in the region.
I think that the combination of the private and public sector relationship, activity, and experience actually made it very useful when talking about the region. We'll probably get to that further along in our conversation, but many times in the Middle East, the division line between government and private sector are sometimes blurred. So being able to have the perspective of an innovation policy on the one hand, but also what does the life of an entrepreneur, a scientist, or a tech executive look like, made it very useful when we try to apply it both in Israel, but also globally.
Fascinating couple of years for sure for you. Talk about the mission of Startup Nation Central.
Well, Startup Nation Central is a not-for-profit organization created 13 years ago with the task basically to help the then somewhat nascent tech ecosystem in Israel, the innovation ecosystem, to flourish, mostly by connecting to global players. So a lot what we've been doing was to provide data, insights, platforms of connectivity and engagement for any global players seeking to engage with that ecosystem. It could be a multinational company, it could be a global investor, a government, a university, or any other player that actually wants to learn more about what the startup nation, Israel was coined that way, can offer to their specific business or interest.
So you're chief scientist for Israel, in the government, getting the lay of the land, developing business relationships, working in the nonprofit sector. Avi, did you ever think something like the Abraham Accords would be possible?
Well, I certainly hoped, and we've had some relationship going on with many of these countries even before the signing of the Accords. But to be fair, it caught us somewhat at surprise. It was a very good job, I must say, by the U.S. administration at that time, along with the leaders of the region, that really made it possible to get to that historic moment of signing with those countries and everything that happened after that.
The atmosphere and the feeling must have been pretty amazing.
It was quite amazing. It was. I have to tell you, Megan, it was obvious to me that, as I've said, even though we were already in the region and doing some stuff, that we're entering a new era, because the ability to move from under the radar and really unleash all of this potential, all of this will, was amazing. And to have the blessing of the country leaders is crucial in an area like the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Moving from an era where Israel is, a potential partner of collaboration, but with a lot of limitations, to an era that not only says we're now part of the same region, but actually says we're thinking about a different Middle East. And I think that's where the Abraham Accords really made the difference in stop looking at the past and really trying to look into what the future can entail for all of us.
How do you see innovation as a bridge in the Middle East?
Well, I think innovation is a bridge not just in the Middle East. Maybe not as universal as music or sports, which we can all relate to, obviously, and I'm sure we've seen the impact, right, when you put children or adults to play music together or to engage in sport. It's always immediate and creates collaboration. Innovation had that trait as well. Obviously, with scientists, technologies, business people, and the like, but it's a natural bridge. You bring like-minded people together that have a common challenge that they want to solve. A scientific challenge, a business challenge, or sometimes a nationwide challenge. Magic happens. And I've seen that happening, throughout my career between Israel and the US, Israel and Europe, Asia, and so on. And I was certain that, innovation can play exactly the same role when we think about a future relationship with our closest neighbors, which in many aspects, we might talk later about the differences in business culture, but staying one moment on the similarities, for me, to be in Dubai or Riyadh or Casablanca in Morocco, it actually felt more familiar and more similar to our culture than Germany or sometimes the other countries worldwide.
So it's been about 5 years since the Abraham Accords. What have you specifically seen since then in terms of progress?
We have to remember, of course, that these 5 years are 3 years before the war in Gaza and everything that brought after that. But in the first 3 years, if we focus on that for a moment, we really saw not just the potential, but we really saw a lot of it being fulfilled. So the bilateral trade between Israel and the UAE rose to about $3 billion, making the Emirates one of Israel's most important trade partners. Now, when we say trade, it's a big word, but it actually speaks about goods, services, collaborations that are being created between companies on both sides. We've seen people-to-people connectivity. We've seen a lot of tourism. We've seen the thirst, the desire, and the ability to collaborate on so many fronts. Each of these countries is different. We tend to put them together. They have different challenges, different levels, but they also have a lot of commonalities that we've seen making fruits in the bilateral relationship.
What do you see as the potential for collaboration in the future? It's only just begun.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think the potential is huge. And again, with each and every one of these countries, there are different issues to be thought about. I think the opportunities go beyond just what we can do on a bilateral level. Because if we look on the Middle East, and we used to think about the Middle East as a source of conflict, of troubles, right? Not necessarily as the source of solutions. Also, from a technology point of view, typically we think about an area that has based its economy mostly on natural resources, oil for the most part, and usually imports ideas, talents, in order to achieve their goals. But when we look into the future, and we combine a very young population throughout the Middle East with leadership on all fronts that really desires to go into the intelligent age of AI and so on. Combined with that collaboration spirit, I truly believe that the Middle East can become a leading region in terms of its science, technology, and economic capability.
You just mentioned two important things. One, the view that the Middle East was just seen as unrest and tension, and the young population that is growing up now with this new inspiration and innovation. Can you give maybe a common challenge that you see being solved through technological innovation?
Yeah, and throughout the past 5 years that have passed, this is not just theory. So we've actually, at Startup Nation Central, managed to create connections between problem owners and solution providers. Many of these problems are not unique to a certain country. Take water as an example. The Middle East is a very arid region, basically a desert, and all countries have problems of supplying water to their people, especially in rural areas. Morocco has suffered one of the worst drought in many, many years, and which really caused cessation of water provision to people in villages and towns. Now, Israel has faced the exact same problems a few decades ago, but is now a net exporter of water. We've done that through technology, desalination technology, and water reuse. The ability to use almost 90% of our water are being reused for agriculture purpose. Now, when you make that knowledge available to your partners, and you combine their understanding, their ability to scale, manufacture, and deploy, this is where you find out that we're actually facing exactly the same problems. If we look in general on the issues of climate adaptation, they don't stop at national borders. Floods or anything of the sort go well beyond any political divisions that are out there. And to that, we can add issues like cybersecurity, food security, the need to modernize healthcare and provide better care to these people, along with other challenges.
You're touching on my next question, which is, how has Startup Nation Central turned the Abraham Accords into just a diplomatic agreement, but into strategic business partnerships?
I understood, Megan, on a very personal level, honestly, when I heard about the Accords, that this is not just a not just an historic opportunity, it's actually an historic obligation. And I really, talking to the team, I said, we have an obligation to make sure that these agreements do not stay at a G2G level, government to government. They don't just, involve security issues and foreign affairs and so on, but we want to bring as many people together into the game. We want to have the business sector participating. We want to have investments. We want to have people-to-people connectivity, the civil society, academia. And the more we create those matchmaking along common challenges, the better chances we have to have a sustainable, long-lasting relationship. So that's exactly what we've been doing. We went to all these countries. We understand what are their issues, what are their priorities. Now, many of these countries, I have to say, are much more organized than Israel in their ability to create long-term plans, Vision 2030 in the case of the Saudis, and there's similar programs in Morocco and the UAE. And when you look in these programs and you analyze what are the needs, you can then very easily go back to the Israeli constituency and say, where can Israel contribute with knowledge, with technology solutions, with the ability to collaborate in order to work together and mitigate those challenges? Over these 5 years, we've created dozens of such collaborations. And every time you create those type of collaboration, you actually multiply the number of ambassadors and people that care about their relationship and want to see it flourish.
How do you think Israel can be a model for other countries in the knowledge economy?
Megan, all of these countries, and this is based, not just on public statement, but also on very intimate conversations that we've been having with them, are really concerned about how can they diversify the economy of their states, more from being based on oil to more of a knowledge economy. Like the Saudis, for example, are actually ahead of schedule about 7 years in terms of lowering their dependency on oil. And you see there are massive investments in AI factories, in compute, in modern infrastructure and such. This is also to serve the younger generation that we talked about, which wants to have those type of value-add opportunities offered to them. Now, when you want to make that journey and become a knowledge ecosystem or a knowledge economy, well, everybody thinks about the Silicon Valley. That's obviously the mecca of innovation. But it's very hard to imagine that one can become Silicon Valley. It's so unique in its attributes and capabilities that it's very hard to imitate. But looking at Israel, which not so long ago looked more like any of these countries with a very centralized socialist economy and government, and managed to transform itself to a leading innovation hub, this is not just inspirational. There are best practices that can be learned and applied in each and every of those countries so that they can themselves do a different version of a knowledge economy, but not less successful.
What do the latest figures say about capital investment in Israeli tech?
Israel tech is going strong. After 2 years of war, we actually have the strongest numbers in terms of high-tech output than we had since 2021, which was really a bubble year in the global market as such. So since the beginning of the year, over $12 billion were invested by venture capital firms in Israeli startups. About $75 billion of mergers and acquisitions of Israeli companies were done by global companies. And certainly there are specific sectors like cybersecurity, financial technologies, where Israel is punching way above its weight. So the startup sector and the tech sector are going strong, really getting that confidence of global companies and global investors alike. One of the challenges that we try to do at Startup Nation Central is to educate that same ecosystem, not just to look west, which it has traditionally done to seek capital, partners, and customers, but also start looking east. Mm-hmm. And understanding that unlike in the past where Israel was somewhat of an island economy, now we can look at the region and imagine even an EU-like economic zone that can also serve as a bridge between India and Europe and provide solutions that will not only serve the countries within it, but actually the entire world.
How do you respond to people that might suggest that war is good for business?
War is not good for anything. I can tell you that from a very personal level. Certainly the fact that we were managed to withstand the war was significant. It is true that out of the war, many times innovation comes, and many times technology that we use for military uses can find its application for agri-tech, water, or even healthcare. So in that sense, it's potentially a silver lining. But the war certainly, was a barrier to a lot of these relationships to continue in the same pace that they happen. I'm quite certain now, as we look into the future, and maybe with more countries joining the circle of the Abraham Accords, we can really move forward and think about the future. You know, Megan, the Middle East is not divided, unlike what people think, between Jews and Muslims, or Jews and Arabs, or Israeli and Arabs. It's divided by people who look into the past and people who look into the future. And I think what we're seeing right now in the Middle East is a generation of leaders, and certainly of people that are looking into the future. And when you write that story, it's very clear that innovation is the new global currency. This is what's going to depict the relationship and probably going to drive it, in the next few decades.
Yeah. And just to expand on that, do you really believe that technology and innovation is the solution to the geopolitical situation in the Middle East?
Well, I think it's part of the solution. I think this is not to say that we can put aside narrative, real conflicts and problems that we need to face to. But I think if we find the solutions to those, and with a determined leadership we can do that, innovation can be the bridge upon we build a new reality and a new relationship. And when you look again into what the Saudis are doing, and their very ambitious plans, from building new advanced cities like Neom to leading the world in AI, or the Emirati space program, which has really become one of the leading programs in the world, Israel can actually contribute a lot to the scale-up of those countries. And those countries can help a lot to Israel, which is sometimes very good in starting out, but not necessarily in scaling up. So I think innovation is going to play a significant role, because at the end of the day, it solves the main problems of humanity looking forward, and it provides the economic basis that can provide a prosperous and therefore a stable Middle East.
So looking ahead, say 10 years down the road, is your core belief that innovation is the future for a successful and prosperous Middle East?
I think innovation is definitely the core for that. I think when we look on the younger generation, which are going to lead 10 years from now, they're much more entrepreneurial in nature. They understand the power of innovation. They were born to it. They're native to it. They use it. AI is going to be a big part of that, not the only technology in place, but certainly one which matters. And even though we live today in a world which is sometimes defined as more closed, maybe less global, we have tariffs, we have technology sovereignty and a lot of need for that, and there's a global arms race for technology. National sovereignty does not mean isolation. And I think partnerships will need to be made. And when people will look into those kind of partnership, the countries of the Middle East should look first into one another. So I think innovation can be a great basis for that. And I'm absolutely certain that 10 years from now, there'll be more than 3 countries that are part of that circle that will represent, what the future entails for us all.
I sure appreciate your optimism. The future is bright.
The future is absolutely bright, especially if we help in shaping it and writing it.
Thank you, Avi. Appreciate your insight today.
Thank you, Megan.
A potent reminder that the strongest bridges are often built through shared progress. And for more stories on people shaping the Middle East, please visit partners.foxnews.com/met.